For years, nobody noticed him. Not the billionaire, not the staff. But today, everything changed in a single moment. What happened when the gate finally opened? You won't believe your eyes. For years, nobody noticed him. Not the billionaire, not the staff, not even the guests who came to the sprawling mansion on the hill. They all passed by him as if he were invisible, a shadow among the roses and fountains. His name was Malik, a quiet, humble man in his late 40s, with hands calloused from decades of labor, yet eyes that held a spark of unspoken dreams. Every morning, Malik arrived before dawn, his worn boots crunching against the gravel driveway, his faded cap pulled low. He pruned the hedges, mowed the lawns, and tended the exotic flowers that the billionaire, Victor Blackwood, claimed as his pride. But for Malik, these flowers were more than property. They were companions in a life that had overlooked him. The mansion's staff barely acknowledged his presence. The butler would nod perfunctorily. The maids whispered behind their hands. Even the billionaire treated him like a fixture, useful but hardly human. During garden parties, while Victor entertained the city's elite in sparkling suits and champagne flutes, Malik remained in the background, silently clipping branches or sweeping leaves, always careful not to disturb the scene. Sometimes the laughter of the guests cut through the morning air like a knife, reminding him how invisible he had become. Children ran past, oblivious to the man who had planted the very flowers they admired. He smiled politely, a practiced mask over the ache he carried because complaining was useless. Nobody cared to listen. Nobody had ever asked his story, but there were small moments, almost unnoticed, where Malik's dignity shone through. When a fragile flower drooped, he bent and whispered gentle words, as if coaxing it back to life. When a bird fell from a branch, he cradled it in his hands and watched it fly again. To those who looked closely, Malik was not just a gardener, he was a caretaker, a silent hero of the mansion's hidden corners. Victor the billionaire was a man of sharp suits, sharper business deals, and an ego as towering as his estate. He walked past Malik every day, barely glancing at the man who had shaped every inch of his gardens. At times, Victor would make cruel jokes in the staff room about the lazy gardener who spent more time talking to plants than doing real work. The staff laughed awkwardly, but Malik said nothing. He had learned long ago that silence was safer than protest. Yet, beneath Malik's quiet exterior was a mind that never stopped observing. He watched the patterns of the estate, the habits of the staff, even the billionaire himself. Every overlooked corner, every unnoticed detail, he filed away in his mind like precious treasure. For Malik, being invisible wasn't just a punishment. It was a chance to prepare, to wait, to create something the world could not ignore. And that morning, like every morning, Malik went about his work as if nothing extraordinary would happen. But today, something was different. Victor passed by as usual, walking with a small entourage, laughing at some private joke, completely oblivious. But as his expensive leather shoes crunched over the gravel, Malik felt a strange tension in the air, as though the world was about to shift in a way he had been waiting for, silently, for years. Little did Malik know, this day would mark the beginning of a chain of events that would shatter the illusion of invisibility forever. The billionaire, the guests, the staff, they were all about to witness something they could never have imagined. Malik's days were long and invisible, but his nights belonged entirely to himself. When the mansion's lights dimmed and the echo of laughter faded into the distance, he would retreat to a small, secluded shed at the far edge of the estate. To anyone walking past, it was nothing more than a dusty, forgotten corner overgrown with ivy. But inside, it was Malik's sanctuary, a place where the world's judgment could not touch him. Inside the shed, Malik's hands were no longer rough from pruning or mowing. They were delicate, precise, and alive with creativity. On the floor lay intricate sculptures carved from driftwood and stone, delicate models of the mansion itself, and small figurines that seemed almost magical in their realism. On a simple, wooden table, a half-finished sculpture of a bird stretched its wings, frozen in time as if about to take flight. Every piece reflected not only his skill, but his imagination and intelligence, qualities no one in the mansion had ever bothered to notice. Malik had always loved creating, ever since he was a boy in a small village far from the city's skyscrapers and luxury cars. He had learned to shape wood with simple tools, to breathe life into stones, and to see the potential in materials others considered worthless. But life had demanded pragmatism. The garden job at Victor Blackwood's estate was steady and respectable. And so, for years, Malik's talent remained hidden, growing quietly like a seed beneath the soil. Even the staff were unaware. To them, Malik was just a man with a trowel and gloves, not someone capable of bending metal, shaping stone, or crafting art that could rival professionals. Occasionally, some curious child might sneak near the shed's door, catching a glimpse of a tiny sculpture, only to be scolded gently. Malik did not mind. His work was not for recognition, it was for him. Yet each piece he completed whispered a promise. One day, the world would see. The mansion had many visitors, but Malik avoided attention. He observed quietly, studying their habits, their flaws, their arrogance. Victor Blackwood's confidence was monumental, bordering on arrogance. He flaunted wealth, made careless jokes at the expense of others, and never imagined that someone in his employ could harbor brilliance. Malik had long accepted this reality. He was invisible, but invisibility had its own advantages. He could observe, plan, and create without distraction. One evening, as rain poured over the estate and the distant thunder rattled the windows, Malik put the finishing touches on a miniature model of the mansion. Every detail was exact: the fountains, the hedges, the wrought iron gates, the luxurious paths. But what made it extraordinary was the hidden compartment he had designed at the back, a clever mechanism that could reveal a miniature garden scene, complete with moving elements and tiny figures that could perform subtle actions. It was not just a model, it was a secret world, a reflection of his imagination and skill. Little did Malik know, a curious neighbor had spotted a faint light flickering in the shed the night before. A young boy, no more than 10, had crept close and peeked through a crack in the door. His eyes widened in disbelief as he glimpsed Malik shaping a figure so lifelike it seemed ready to step off the table. The boy ran home, whispering to his parents about the magician in the garden. Word traveled quietly, a small ripple that would eventually reach Victor. But not yet. Even among these shadows, Malik remained humble. He never created for fame or wealth. Every curve, every carving, every detail was a testament to patience, skill, and vision. Yet beneath that humility was a quiet determination. He knew the mansion and the billionaire's world intimately, every pathway, every gate, every hidden nook. He had mapped them all in his mind. And now his talent had grown to a point where it could change not just his life, but the perception of everyone around him. One night, Malik sat back on a small wooden stool and admired his latest work, a sculpture of a bird perched atop the mansion's main gate, wings spread as if ready to soar. In his heart, he knew it was not just a bird. It was a message, a symbol of freedom, recognition, and the moment when the world would finally see him for who he truly was. At the same time, Victor Blackwood remained oblivious, laughing with his guests about trivial matters, boasting about investments, and mocking minor mistakes made by the staff. He had no idea that beneath his feet, among the roses and the quietly humming garden, someone was quietly preparing a revelation that would shake his arrogance to its core. And so the night continued. With Malik working meticulously, shaping his vision piece by piece. Each stroke, each cut, each model whispered a story of perseverance, brilliance, and patience. The hidden world inside the shed was his kingdom, unseen but powerful. And somewhere deep down, Malik knew the day of reckoning was near. The world had ignored him for too long, and soon they would have no choice but to notice. The next morning began like any other. Victor Blackwood striding through his mansion, checking schedules, barking orders, and basking in the admiration of the city's elite. But the universe, as it often does, had plans to shake even the most confident of men. It started with a small problem. The grand fountain in the center of the garden, Victor's pride, had stopped working. No amount of maintenance or repairs could revive it. The staff scrambled, calling plumbers and electricians, but nothing seemed to work. In the world of Victor Blackwood, a broken fountain was not just a minor inconvenience, it was a symbolic disaster, a blemish that could not exist in his carefully curated life. Victor paced nervously near the entrance, his expensive shoes clicking against the marble floors. "How is it possible?" he snapped. "This fountain has never failed before." His voice was sharp, tinged with anger and disbelief. Staff members murmured excuses and blamed minor oversights, but Victor would hear none of it. Pride, after all, was a billionaire's second skin. Malik, meanwhile, had been tending to the roses in a quiet corner of the estate. He had heard the commotion but made no move to intervene. Years of invisibility had taught him patience, and he preferred observing before acting. But as Victor's frustration grew, Malik noticed something that no one else had. The fountain's mechanism was simple yet delicate, requiring precision and insight that only someone familiar with both machinery and aesthetics could manage. The staff tried their best, fiddling with valves and pipes, but only made matters worse. Water splashed onto the marble floor, guests stared in confusion, and Victor's anger simmered. "This is unacceptable! Someone fix this now!" he barked. It was then that Malik stepped forward, his hands still dirty from soil and mulch. Staff whispered, "What is he doing?" Victor barely glanced at him. "The gardener? Do you even know how to handle this?" he scoffed. Malik didn't answer. He knelt by the fountain, examining the pipes, the valves, the intricate system that controlled the water flow. His fingers moved quickly and confidently, twisting knobs, tightening screws, adjusting small mechanisms. Within minutes, the fountain sputtered, coughed, and then roared to life, water dancing beautifully in the morning light, spraying perfectly across the marble basin. For a brief moment, silence fell. Guests gasped, staff stared, Victor's mouth opened, but no words came out. The fountain's water sparkled like liquid diamonds, reflecting the sun in a spectacle that should have belonged entirely to Victor, but now bore the invisible mark of the man he had ignored for years. Victor's mind raced. How had this man, someone he barely acknowledged, solved what no one else could? Pride wrestled with astonishment. He forced a laugh, half nervous, half dismissing, but it didn't cover the shock in his eyes. "Well, I suppose even a gardener can have some talents," he muttered, trying to regain composure. Malik simply stood, brushing his hands on his worn apron. "The fountain just needed the right adjustments," he said quietly, almost apologetically. There was no arrogance in his voice, only calm confidence. But the moment did not go unnoticed. A young guest whispered to his mother, "Did you see that? He fixed it all by himself." A staff member shook their head in disbelief. Malik's quiet heroism had begun to ripple outward, though Victor remained stubbornly in denial, unwilling to admit the gardener's brilliance fully, and yet something had changed. For the first time, Victor looked at Malik, not with indifference but with a flicker of recognition, though he did not fully understand it. It was a subtle shift, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to unsettle the billionaire's rigid world. Malik returned to his corner, resuming work as if nothing had happened. To him, the incident was minor, a single demonstration of what he could do. But it had planted a seed. The world had caught the first glimpse of his brilliance. And somewhere deep down, Malik knew that this seed would grow, leading inevitably to the moment that could no longer be ignored, the gate moment that would astonish everyone. As the day ended, Victor lingered near the fountain, staring at the water with a mix of pride, confusion, and unease. He could not shake the image of Malik's calm, capable hands, nor the realization that perhaps the man he had ignored for years was far more extraordinary than he had ever imagined. Little did Victor know, this incident was just the beginning, a prelude to a revelation so stunning it would leave the billionaire speechless and the entire estate forever changed. The morning sun broke over the estate, casting long golden rays across the perfectly trimmed lawns and ornate fountains. Victor Blackwood walked toward the mansion's grand gate, feeling an unusual tension in the air. Something about today felt different, though he couldn't place it. He had the uneasy sensation that his carefully controlled world was about to shift. Malik, as usual, was already at work, tending to the edge of the garden near the gate. But today, he carried something extra, a small, intricately carved box, his hands steady despite the pounding of his heart. This was the culmination of years of secret work, countless nights spent creating something extraordinary. It was time to reveal it. Victor reached the gate, flanked by his usual entourage. He expected the usual scene: polished marble, well-kept, hedges, and perhaps a slightly over-enthusiastic gardener. What he did not expect was the sight that awaited him. With a calm motion, Malik stepped aside and gently opened the gate. And there it was, a breathtaking display that made Victor freeze in disbelief. Before him, a garden unlike anything he had ever imagined spread out. Flowers bloomed in impossible patterns, sculptures of incredible detail dotted the landscape, and water features danced in perfect harmony. Every element was alive, vibrant, and precise, a living masterpiece shaped by the hands of the man he had ignored for years. Victor's eyes widened. The fountain Malik had repaired yesterday now glittered like liquid crystal, complemented by delicate stone figurines that seemed to move with a life of their own. Birds carved from wood perched atop carefully trimmed hedges, and hidden mechanisms caused them to flap and chirp realistically. The entire garden seemed enchanted, magical, as if it were a scene from a dream rather than a simple estate. The staff gasped, the guests murmured, but Malik stood quietly, calm and composed, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. His humility contrasted sharply with the astonishment surrounding him. Victor, however, could not speak. Pride, shock, and awe collided within him, leaving him momentarily paralyzed. This can't be real, Victor finally managed to whisper, his voice trembling. How did you... Malik smiled gently. It is real, he said softly. Years of patience, observation, and work. He didn't boast. He didn't gloat. He simply let the masterpiece speak for itself. For the first time, Victor saw Malik not as a gardener, not as a background fixture, but as a man of extraordinary talent, vision, and brilliance. Every moment of neglect, every slight, every ignored. Effort now seemed petty in comparison to the artistry before him. The garden shimmered in the sunlight, each detail a testament to Malik's skill. It was more than beauty. It was a message, a statement that brilliance can thrive even in obscurity, and that the world's recognition can come in a single, transformative moment. And in that moment, the billionaire understood something he had never grasped before. Ignoring someone like Malik was not just a mistake. It was a tragedy of his own arrogance. Victor remained at the gate, speechless, while Malik, calm and steady, simply watched the reactions of the people who had long overlooked him. The moment was electric, charged with awe, disbelief, and a sense of justice finally delivered. The gate, once a barrier of indifference, had become a portal to recognition, transformation, and a new chapter, one where the invisible gardener finally stood at the center of the world he had quietly built. The sunlight glimmered on Malik's garden masterpiece, casting reflections across the water features, stone carvings, and hidden mechanical wonders. Victor Blackwood stood frozen at the gate, still grappling with the magnitude of what he was witnessing. The man he had ignored, mocked, and dismissed for years now stood as the center of brilliance, a living testament to talent, patience, and resilience. Victor's mind raced. How could he have overlooked this? All the wealth, all the status, all the so-called knowledge in the world, it had blinded him to the most extraordinary thing right under his nose. And there was Malik, calm and dignified, watching without a trace of arrogance. "Malik," Victor finally managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. This is incredible. I didn't realize." Malik looked at him gently, a small smile on his lips. "I didn't do this for recognition," he said. "I did it because it mattered, because the work itself is worth it, because patience and care have their own rewards." For a moment, Victor had no words. His ego struggled to catch up with reality. The guests whispered excitedly, snapping photos and videos, their reactions a mixture of awe and disbelief. The staff, who had spent years treating Malik like a shadow, now stared with a mixture of guilt, wonder, and admiration. But the true power of Malik's work went beyond mere artistry. Hidden within the garden, Malik had installed intricate mechanisms that showcased his understanding of engineering, design, and even business strategy. The miniature model of the mansion, which had seemed like a simple sculpture, was in fact a blueprint for innovations that could enhance the estate and, potentially, create wealth beyond imagination. Victor's pride faltered, replaced by an urgent curiosity. How did you come up with this?" he asked, now fully humbled. Malik's answer was simple. "Years of observing, learning, and doing what I love. You don't see the work if you only look for recognition." The moment was more than a revelation, it was justice. For years, Malik had been invisible, overlooked because of prejudice, assumptions, and the arrogance of wealth. Today, the world could no longer ignore him. Every detail, every hidden mechanism, every artistic flourish shouted the truth. Talent and brilliance cannot be contained by walls, privilege, or ignorance. Victor realized his mistake. Slowly, he walked closer, extending a hand, not in command, but in genuine acknowledgement. "I owe you an apology," he said sincerely. "I judged you too quickly. You've shown me what I failed to see for years." Malik shook his head gently. "No apology is needed. Let the work speak for itself." The guests erupted in applause. Some rushed to record the garden on their phones, sharing the story instantly on social media. News of the hidden genius gardener spread like wildfire. Malik's life had changed in ways he never sought, but the world was finally paying attention. And then came the moment that cemented the story in everyone's memory. Victor, humbled and impressed, announced publicly that Malik would oversee the mansion's entire landscaping and creative projects, with full recognition and compensation beyond anything he had imagined. Malik accepted, but with the same humility he had shown all along. He had not done it for reward, but the acknowledgement felt right, and the world was finally aware of his brilliance. As the sun set over the estate, casting golden light across the fountains and sculptures, Malik stood quietly near the gate, observing the world that had once ignored him. There was pride, yes, but also peace. He had waited patiently, worked diligently, and the moment had finally come. This was more than a story of recognition. It was a lesson. Talent can thrive in silence, patience can outlast neglect, and brilliance will always find a way to shine. If Malik's story inspired you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that their hard work and talent will one day be recognized. And comment below, who else do you know is quietly amazing, waiting for their moment to shine? Your voice could be the spark that changes their life.